All right. So as an introduction, we'd like to acknowledge that our mission at Vose Library is to advance learning, inspire curiosity, enrich lives, and promote community. With that in mind, let me introduce our guest. Wendy Ulmer is a former public school music and English teacher with 21 years experience. Prior to teaching, she was a registered music therapist working in both clinical and public school settings. Wendy earned a BS in music education from Lebanon Valley College and a master's in education in the creative arts and learning from Lesley University. She is the author of 8 books for children, including the Journals of Anturg, inspired by the village in Pennsylvania where she grew up. Today, Wendy lives in Aroostook Island near Bath, where she can be found combing the beach for treasures or roaming through the woods looking for dragons. Without further ado, please help me welcome Wendy Ulmer.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate the introduction. And yes, I do look for dragons, and I live in a house full of dragons. And maybe at the end, I'll show you one of the bigger dragons. But I am what I consider to be an accidental author. I never started out to be an author. I always wrote, but I did it for fun. I did it for me. And my first book ended up coming out after my father had passed away, and I wrote it for all the kids to have a way to remember him. And that was called A Campfire for Cowboy Billy. And somehow that started the ball rolling, and here I am today with 8 books. So that's how it happened. So tonight I'm going to share 3 books with you. They're going to cover the age span from the toddlers to lower elementary to upper elementary. And I'm going to talk a little bit with each one about how you can use that book and just give you a chance to enjoy the book also, like the kids do. So for just a minute, I'm going to share the screen and we'll get this hooked up, okay? Whoops, it says I'm disabled. Oh, now let's try it again. Still says I'm disabled. Here we go. All right. This is when I always, cross my fingers that it's all going to come up. All right, here we go. There we go. So the first book is called One Green Tree. It is based on a larger book I wrote first called My 12 Main Christmas Days, which you may or may not know. And the actual cover looks like this. And I want to talk for just a second about the artwork. Sandy Crabtree lives in Bath, Maine. She was my department head at Morse High School. When I taught music, she taught art. She is known for her watercolors. She is considered a fine artist, not a book illustrator. But I happened to kind of twist her arm a little bit and convinced her to do the book. So this is based on a bigger book, but made for the little ones. So One Green Tree. Now, what I want to point out is if you're using this book with children, I thought it was just for the littles. And then a reading specialist thanked me for writing the book. And I said, why? And she said, because I use this with my kindergartners learning to read, because you have one number and one number word, one color word, one object word. She said they can very, very quickly become very successful reading. So with that in mind, we will just go through and I'll tell you a little bit about the illustration. This one came from up in Verstick County. Okay. This is 2 red oars. And when we're using it with the children, we ask them again, what else are there 2 of? We're looking for boats. We're looking for the columns under the shack. This is from Monhegan Island. It is the most painted fish shack on the island. Every art student goes there to paint this fish shack. 3 yellow butterflies and 4 purple lupins. We often explain with the kids, they know very well what the butterflies are, but the significance of lupins in Maine and how they're such a big thing in the spring in June. And my favorite book in the world is Miss Rumphius. So I was very, very happy to put in 4 purple lupins. 5 brown moose. And yes, we had to do research to make sure they had triplets, and they do have triplets. And we asked the kids to find all of them because they quickly find 4, and then they have to go looking to find the daddy moose up in the corner. The 6 orange mittens. Another thing you can do if you have the Christmas book is you can use a comparison between that book and this book, because in the big book, they aren't 6 orange mittens. They're 6 woolen mittens and they're different colors. Okay, so you can do all kinds of comparisons, how we change between the 2 books. And it's a really good compare and contrast lesson for the kids. 7 white sand dollars. This happens to be the illustrator's granddaughter. And this was taken at, was drawn from Hermit Island. Okay. 8 gray clams. This is done from Sagadahoc Bay down in Georgetown. And the clammer in the back, that is my son-in-law. He's married to my daughter. So. 9 blueberries. This was from up near Ellsworth that this came from. And the kids always say to me, that's not even enough berries for a muffin. I'm like, okay, they're right. And 10 black-capped chickadees. And of course, we have them count on every page. And the fun thing about this one is that that bird feeder hung in the neighbor's yard next to the illustrator's house. And she didn't tell the neighbor. And it took 6 months before the neighbor realized that their bird feeder was in that book. And so that's where we end that book, because 10 is the number 1 thing we want children to learn in the beginning when they're counting is 1 to 10. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. That's pretty straightforward and just a fun thing. But if anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and ask. And if not, I'll go on to our bigger book.
So Wendy, Angie is asking, well, first of all, she's saying this is wonderful. Is this printed in a board book format? She's curious.
Yes, it is. It is a board book.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it in the chat. Yeah.
There we go. All right. This is our second book. And I don't want to confuse you with the fact that there's this gorgeous little picture of this little fox, because that isn't what the illustrations are like. But when we get to the third set, the third books that we're going to talk about, there's a fox in there and he looks so much like him. I had to use him. But this is what the book really looks like. There we go. A isn't for fox and isn't alphabet. After I had written Cowboy Billy, I was teaching high school English, and I was trying to get the kids to use more detail, and they just were terrible at it. And so one day I said, just write me 2 paragraphs and explain everything by what it isn't. So the boy not wearing sneakers didn't chase the girl who didn't have freckles. Okay. So then I went down to my faculty meeting, and I'm sitting there and A isn't for fox jumps into my head. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if I could write an alphabet book. Do we have any teachers here? Because, okay, you'll appreciate this then. For the next 2 years, all I did in faculty meetings was write this book. So shame on me, but at the end, the principal said, well, something good came out of it all. So after all that, I wrote the main learning results and then they dumped them. So I'm glad I wrote the book. So, all right. So A isn't for fox. And with the kids, I say, what are the ants doing? What are they doing on that cover? And why are they doing it? And try and get them to A isn't for fox. And then we have A isn't for fox, and we have a fox with a box. So then I ask the kids, what kind of book is this? A fox with a box, getting them to say it's rhyming. And so here we go. A isn't for box, it isn't for fox. A is for ants that climb over your socks. B isn't for kite, it isn't for light. B is for bats that fly by in the night. C isn't for nap, it isn't for map. C is for cat curled up on your lap. D isn't for crow, it isn't for snow. D is for dragons from times long ago. E isn't for spoons, it isn't for moons. E is for elephants trumpeting tunes. F isn't for hogs, it isn't for dogs. F is for frogs kerplopping off logs. G isn't for mugs, it isn't for bugs. G is for geckos that hide on the rug. H isn't for rings, it isn't for strings. H is for hummingbirds with green wings. I isn't for dot, it isn't for pot. I is for iguana who loves a hot spot. J isn't for key, it isn't for knee. J is for jellyfish surfing the sea. K isn't for rain, it isn't for train. K is for kangaroo on an Australian plain. L isn't for drama, it isn't for mama. L is for llamas in fuzzy pajamas. M isn't for rat, it isn't for bat. M is for moose in a red checkered hat. N isn't for clown, it isn't for brown. N is for nuthatch who walks upside down. O isn't for docks, it isn't for rocks. O is for octopus knitting 4 pairs of socks. And of course, we talk about how many legs they have and why they're doing that. P isn't for goats, it isn't for boats. P is for possums in warm furry coats. Q isn't for towns, it isn't for frowns. Q is for queen bees with lopsided crowns. R isn't for ear, it isn't for year. R is for reindeer in backpacking gear. S isn't for chair, it isn't for bear. S is for salmon that leap through the air. And we always ask the kids, what is the bear thinking? What does he want? T isn't for pies, it isn't for flies. T is for turtles with purple bow ties. And I have this painting in my house. So I wake every morning to seeing happy turtles. So you can't be sad then, okay? U isn't for teams, it isn't for streams. U is for unicorn that visit in dreams. V isn't for dove, it isn't for glove. V is for vultures that watch from above. W isn't for door, it isn't for snore. W is for woodpecker, whose bill is quite sore. X isn't for C's, it isn't for P's. X is for xenops in rainforest trees. Y isn't for fairy, isn't for dairy. Y is for yaks, chocolate brown and so hairy. And Z isn't for pipes, it isn't for wipes. Z is for zebras with zigzaggy stripes. And look at the bellies of the zebras. See what's on there? It's a fun, yeah? So if you were all kids, this is what I would do next. And then I say 2 words. They do thumbs up or thumbs down if it is a matching word. And then we check to see if it is. And so I would be saying them, they thumbs up or they thumbs down. And that's how we do it. And that's one of the things I do in person. We do a lot of other things, but we'll get rid of this because I want to show you how they always tell you write from what you know, write from your history. And how would you do that in an alphabet book, right? This is how I did it. The yak is chocolate brown and so hairy. So I grew up near Hershey, Pennsylvania, and my father was the photographer for Hershey Foods. And guess who got to eat all the chocolate after he took the pictures? My sisters and I did. But the weird thing was, we had Halloween candy in March and Easter bunnies in October, because he had to do them that far ahead. So the chocolate is for my dad. Okay. The woodpeckers for my mom. She loved watching the birds, and we had pileated woodpeckers in Pennsylvania, just like we have pileated woodpeckers here. So that was for her. All right, this is a story from where I grew up. In Mount Gretna, there are big trees, lots of big trees. And in the evening, the vultures, turkey vultures, fly into Mount Gretna, and they sit there in the trees, and they make all kinds of noise, and they make a real mess, just like birds and seagulls do. Well, the people didn't want them there, but they didn't want to hurt them. So they created something called the Boom Squad. And the Boom Squad, they have pipes that are like 6 feet long, about this big around, and they sit on the ground at an angle like this. So this side shooting up into the air, and this side is on the ground, and there's a firecracker at the end of it. So at night, in come the vultures flying in, and they sit up there and they're squawking and they're making dirt, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, and they all fly away and go somewhere else to sleep for the night. And that still happens today. So if you're in Mount Gretna in the evening, get ready. It's going to happen. All right, we're going to go back a few here. Okay. The moose, of course, is because we live in Maine. They said, do you want a moose or a deer? And I just looked at them like they were crazy. I said, a moose. All right. By the way, I had to rewrite half this book. The first version only had half of them as animals. They wanted them all as animals. So I had to rewrite half of the book. And they did it that way so teachers could use it and say, find all the mammals in A as in for fox, or find all the amphibians. So there was other ways to use it. The elephants are in there with the trumpet because I had a brother-in-law who passed away, unfortunately, very young, who was a composer and a conductor and started as a trumpet player. So this is to kind of a nod to him, to let him know we haven't forgotten him. So the dragons are because I'm a dragon freak, as I said before. And last but not least, my niece, who lives near Hershey, she's a zookeeper at the North American Zoo in Hershey. And the very first time I went to visit her at her house, she was standing in her kitchen holding a baby fruit bat and feeding it with an eyedropper. And that's what she was doing. And so this is to celebrate Anne and her life as a zookeeper with the fruit bats. Okay. So that is A as in for fox. Anybody have any questions about that one? That one, by the way, won the 2009 Teacher's Choice Award for Language Arts from Learning Magazine.
Fabulous, Wendy. Well, one person, Doug had asked about how you chose your animals, so you've already answered that. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
And
then,
some of them had to do with what I could rhyme, what I could make
Yes.
rhyme. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then Angie's saying another creative creation. It'd be fun to make a group not alphabet book.
Yes.
Angie was a teacher as well. And she said, I also love that your dad inspired your writing.
Yeah. My dad has, yeah, a lot of things inspire my writing, and my family is definitely one of them. So, okay, let's go to the next one.
I'm just going to say before you move on, or as you move on, Wendy, you've really linked with some pretty amazing illustrators as well, because those full page, the use of the full double page is really striking. It's They're lovely.
It is. It was tricky to take pictures of, though, to put on here
Yes.
to get it. But I have been blessed, totally blessed with my illustrators. Cowboy Billy, I never saw that book until it was a book, because often you don't.
Right.
And it's a beautiful book also. And then A isn't for Fox. I requested that for the next book, which is called Zero Zilch Nada, Counting to None. Had the same illustrator, came out beautiful. Then Sandy did the next two books, the Christmas book and this one. And in a minute, I'll show you the next one. And again, I was totally blessed with the illustrators, and happy that they allowed me to find them. Well,
Yes.
I'll explain why I was allowed to find them, because, okay, last one. So for the second book, the alphabet book and the counting book, which you don't see here right now, or Billy originally, they were all done with traditional publishing. And in fact, Cowboy Billy was chosen off the slush pile, which is like unheard of. But that was way back in '97. So anyway, so when you work with a big publisher, it's like giving your child away and hope when your child comes back, you don't want to put a bag over their head, okay? Because you just don't know. And so Cowboy Billy was hard for me not to know what he was going to look like. But then I have become good friends with my editor for the alphabet book. She has been a part of every single one of my books, and we've become good friends. And so I have had some say in the illustrations going on. But the Christmas book, the board book, and these three books, I am also the publisher. I did these myself, which means I got to say who the illustrator was. I okayed everything, but luckily I work with a group of brilliant people and I trust them. And if they would say, Wendy, this is what could happen, I would go with them because they knew what was going on. So after the Christmas book and the little book were done, I had some screwball idea that I could write something longer. And I really don't know why I thought that. But this is, again, how things come out of your own life. My husband and I were going with friends to a restaurant in Camden called the Atlantica, which is not there anymore, unfortunately, but it was out on one of the piers on the docks. And we went there to eat, and I don't eat a whole lot. So they all ordered appetizers. I did not order an appetizer. And out comes the waiter with the tray with 4 covered dishes. So they put 3 down and then he put one in front of me. And I said, I'm sorry, but I didn't order anything. And he said, well, my slip says this plate at this table at this seat. So here it is. And then my friend said, oh, just if you don't like it, we'll take it. Like, okay. So I lift the lid off, and sitting there is a green ceramic dragon that they had found in a pottery shop. And my friend had said to my husband, you have to buy that for her. There's no choice, buy it. So he did, and then they worked with the restaurant, and that's how I got it, which is, I think, one of the sweetest memories I have. So he became the first Atlantica dragon, okay? So a couple months later, these same friends send me a package. I open it up, and what's inside? A little brown dragon, okay? So I'm going to read you a few sentences from page 15 in the first book. The first book is The Call. Sitting in the broken shell like a very small child was a baby brown dragon, his tiny front claws grabbing his toes, his big ears laying against his scaly head, and his large black eyes looking up at Modo. So there he is, and as he became in the book. But what I didn't realize is his head comes off. I'm like, why does his head come off? Well, when you take his head off, inside is a sword. So now I had a big dragon. I had a baby dragon. I had a sword. I'm like, there's got to be a story here. There is a story here. And where could that story possibly take place but where I grew up, in Mount Gretna, Pennsylvania? And this is what it looks like where I grew up to this day. Cottages, wraparound porches, rocking chairs, Victorian gingerbread, little narrow paths everywhere. Down in the bottom left, that is called the Hall of Philosophy, because it is based on the Chautauqua in New York. So they have book readings there, they have art lessons there, have all kinds of things there. In the book, it's called the Hall of Enchantment. So there are many, many things from Mount Gretna and the area in Pennsylvania where I grew up that are in the book. For instance, look at the word Gretna, look at the word Anterg. Okay, I did that over and over when it worked. So one of the towns nearby where I grew up is Lebanon. It is called Nonabel in the book. Okay, so there's all kind of things like that. And on the call page on my website, there is a activity to show you all the connections to Pennsylvania in the book, okay? So I've got to make sure I know where I'm going next here. All right, so this is book 1 in the Journals of Anterg, and it's called The Call. Now, you notice you can see the oak leaves and acorns and the moon that are embossed on this cover. I made my cover like this because I wanted it to look like the journals that the kids carried around in their pockets in the book. All right. And later at the end, I will tell you more about the covers, but you can't actually see the embossing. I had to do a real fancy lighting trick for you to see it. And I'll tell you what happened with the covers at the end. But there are naturals and magics who live in this village, and it doesn't matter which you are. This whole series is about friendship, loyalty, diversity, taking care of each other. That's what it's about, set in a fantasy framework. So if you are a magic, you would have a moon on your book. If you are a natural, you would have a star on your book, okay? So this is Moto and his mom going to school he'd been going to the village school, and when you get to around 4th grade, you can go and be tested to see if you're a magic. And he was on his way for that test, knowing his whole family were magics and worried what was going to happen if he wasn't. Even though he knew it didn't matter in their town, he knew his big brother would never let him live it down, okay? And you can see how much it looks like Mount Gretna. The little cottages, the little paths, the porches, very much like Mount Gretna. And I know this is a total bias on my part, but there is magic in Mount Gretna. All you have to do is get there and get out of your car and you will feel it. It is there. And that's probably why I grew up to be the goofy person I am. So anyway. So Moto is a magic, and he ends up getting a baby dragon, which was very unusual. I also want to show you down at the bottom there, you see the backpack with the flute. That's very important. The flute is part of Moto's magic, and it's the way he calls the dragon, by playing his flute. So there's a lot of music in this book. There's a lot of the arts in this book also, okay? So one thing about the dragon, he only speaks in rhymes. And on this day, Moto's getting ready to go to school and says, I'll be back. And the dragon says, Moto go Ibu stay makes for dragging dragon day. Okay. So what I'm gonna show you next now is how I go about writing my books. Okay. I write by hand. Everything is by hand first before it ever goes in the computer. And I have this notebook method I came up with. So I'm right-handed, so I write on the right-hand side. If you were left-handed, you would write on the left-hand side, okay? The other side stays blank. Then when I go back and I find something that I need either to embellish or change or add in, instead of trying to scribble it in or something, if you look on the right-hand side, you see a 1 with a circle and an asterisk. Go to the left-hand side, there it is, and that's what I need to put in at that spot. So when you see the 2 later, it's the same thing. And it's a good way to teach kids to write because they tend to erase and scratch and make all kinds of messes. And this way, not only is it easier for them, it's easier for the teacher to know what they were thinking and figure out what they were doing. Now, the scratching out is really unusual in mine, but I was using Moto's name. It was Moto's father's name. It is supposed to be Moto's uncle. And I knew I had to catch myself quick. So, but that's how I write. I write it all by hand before it goes on to the computer. When I write Ibu's rhymes are hard to write, that they work well. A lot of publishers will not even look at a rhyming book. They don't even want to see them. So when I do it, I usually have the first line, and you see that rhyme is up there in brackets, and it ends with the word fly on the first line. So what I will do is I will line a page full of every word I can think of that rhymes with fly. And then I will start playing with how to make it work. When I think I have it worked out, I take my rhymes for a walk. And what that means is I literally stand up with the rhyme and I walk and say it like I'm in marching band or something. And if my foot doesn't come down at the right place in the rhyme, then I don't have the rhythm right yet. And I have to go back and do it again and do it again until I get the rhythm right. Okay. And I did that. I about wore out a rug writing the alphabet book. It was crazy. Okay. The only other thing I want to point out on this page is in the middle of the page, just remember that line where Moto says, "I'm afraid of heights." And just think about that for a minute. Okay. All right. So the other thing I did is I make charts while I'm writing. These are not set in stone in any way, shape, or form. Okay. But when I realized that not only was I writing one book, I was writing multiple books, you have to keep track of who's going where from one book to the next and who did what and who's connected to who. And also come up with ideas for what are they going to do in the next book. And that's what this is. Some of this came out in the next book, some of it didn't, but it's just the way it works out. So that brings us to book 2, which is called The Dragons. By the way, the titles are in foil. The first one was gold foil. This title is silver foil. This one, you literally cannot see the embossing, which I love that you can't see it, okay? So this is The Dragons. And who should show up in The Dragons but Moto and Gavin's cousin, Paige. And the boys do not know what to do with her. They really don't. See, she's got a little bit of attitude there. And she also is given Moto's room and he has to move in with his brother. So that doesn't make her very popular either in the whole thing. Turns out that Paige is pretty important in this book. This is Oren, Tommy, Jack, and Tommy, and they are Moto's best friends through all 3 books. And Oren and Jack are both magics. Tommy is a natural, but Tommy has been Moto's best friend since he's a little boy and is very important, as are the other boys. Oren has the gift that he can draw something and he can make it come alive for 2 hours. And so after the 2 hours, it goes back to just being a drawing, okay? Jack has the gift of being able to dance the weather. He learns different ways to dance that will change the weather to whatever they might need, you know. And Tommy's big gift is his gift of friendship, of what he brings to the whole group, okay? So remember about Moto being afraid of heights? I love this illustration because he's doing everything that Ibu tells him not to do. Moto must always look ahead, not look down or to the side. Look to see where we're going, then smoothly down we will glide. And Moto's looking to the side and he's looking down. So the second book has a lot to do with Moto learning to fly in order to be able to do with the dragon what he needs to do, okay? And there's some pretty funny moments in all that going on. So now we're going to talk about what happens when you send your manuscript in and it gets edited. So I will tell you first that when it comes back to me, there are 3 steps that I go through. On day 1, I am paralyzed. I mean, literally paralyzed. I sit there and I page through it, looking at all these blue boxes. And the worst was the dragons had 112 blue boxes. And I was like, what? And I literally just sit there and stare at it. The little lines on the left-hand side, those are where a word might be moved or one word might be changed or punctuation, little things like that. The blue boxes, I have a fabulous editor, by the way. I was scared to death and he's amazing. He edits by asking you questions. And he tells you right up front, I am not going to rewrite your book. I am not going to fix your book. I am going to ask you questions and make you think, and you're going to fix your book, which is what a good editor is supposed to do. So as I have there, he's to make me a better writer, not to make me upset. But that doesn't matter. I'm still paralyzed the first day. The second day, I literally cry. I do, I cry, because I'm like, 1, I've already written this book 6 times. And 2, there's 112 blue boxes. How am I going to do this? You know, I'm just like, you know. Then the third night, I get angry at myself and say, all right, pull yourself together, Ulmer, and get to work. Just get to work. And literally for the next 4 days, 12 hours a day, I am locked in a room to do this. That's what I do. Because he doesn't give me big turnarounds. I have it a week, he has it a week. I have it a week, he has it a week. It's just none of this 6-month stuff, you know. All right, so how do I do that? I get a notebook, I go through the whole thing, and I not write down the page, EB or his initials. I write down what number blue box it is, and I make a little note what he's asking me to do. Okay, what is it he wants me to do? So I try and interpret those blue boxes. So you have to remember, every one of those was a blue box. So that between page 25 and page 38, we had 13 blue boxes. Okay, now sometimes a blue box is just fixing a word or adding 1 sentence. Sometimes it is adding a whole lot more. Okay, so I rewrite by the chapters. Like you can see up there, the first thing was just to move one part to a different part of the chapter, no big deal. But then the second part here, I had to come in with a whole other section that I had to put in the book, okay? So every time you do that, you add more to your word count, which then adds to your page count. And then you have to reset where every chapter starts because it bumps things around, like, you know, all kinds of places like that. So that's what happens through the editing. And it goes back, and the first time it was like 5 times. The second time we cut out 8 chapters and 4 characters. 8 chapters and 4 characters. So that went back and forth about 4 times. The last one only went back and forth like 3 times. So I guess either I'm getting better or he's getting less fussy. I don't know which it is, but anyway. So that brings us to book 3, the last book in the trilogy, The Sword. And this is the only one that you can actually kind of see the sword on the cover, which I kind of didn't want him to do that, but that's the way it came out. I think they felt bad, but that's how it came out. So this, in this book, Modo and Ibu fly to the land of the dragons, where they are tested to see if they can continue to be a dragon and a pard. Modo is not a dragon master. They are called pards, like partners. They are equal in what they are doing. So the big dragon up on the top on the left, that's Draken. He is the leader of the dragons. The one in the middle is Column. He is an ancient red dragon. And the one leaning over is Ibu, looking for Modo coming up the stairs after they've gotten there. And this is the very, very end of the last book of the trilogy. And I won't tell you anything about who's flying away on that dragon, but there's Modo and Ibu and everybody watching them go. And as I said, music has a lot to do with it. So the dragons are humming the anthem of Anterg as they go across the Blue Mountains. So now we'll talk for a minute about illustration. Okay. So because I'm a publisher, I get to see all the sketches. I get to help choose which sketch we're going to put in the book. I go first, you know, just on gut reaction, and then we talk about it with the art director and the illustrator and the project manager, how it fits in. So we chose the one up there on the upper right. So then the illustrator does a line drawing, and this is the basic outline of what that illustration is going to be. I have to okay that. Then she goes on to make the completed illustration, which looks like that. And she's done the whole thing with pencil. It is all pencil. And they aren't even as big as what's on your screen. They're only about that big. The illustrations, they're amazing. This is the first book that she did, is black and white illustrations. All her other books have been colored picture books. And she had been waiting for a manuscript to come that said, this is the one, and she chose mine. Her name's Sandra Salisbury, and she's from Berkeley, California. So I've never met her. I've never even talked to her, but we go back and forth that way. Okay. So now the covers. So when that cover came with the call and you couldn't see it, they were very upset at the printers. And they said, well, we'll just do a whole new set of covers and we'll put color on the embossing. And I said, no, I can't afford that. I can't do that because you have to pay everything up front. Everything has to be paid up front. Okay. And I said, I can't afford it. Give me a couple days. So they had sent me just the cover, not the whole book, just covers. And I went to lunch with a friend and she said, do you have one of those with you? I said, yeah. She said, give it to me. So I gave it to her and she laid it on it and she looked at it and she rubbed her hand over it. And then she pulled out a napkin. She laid her napkin over it and then she pulled out a pencil, because you can do rubbings of all the covers. So it was perfect. So now this paper in the middle goes inside the cover of a book when I sell it. telling them how to get the magic out of the cover. And we tell them there's magic in the covers, and this is how you can do it. And so when you do the entire cover of the dragons, you end up with that. Okay. And I've had kids actually do the entire cover with the title and everything. But I also found out that a lot of times when the parents are buying them as gifts, they go home and do it with computer paper before they give it to the kids because they want to see how it comes out. Okay. It's a lot of fun to do it. It really is a lot of fun. So I just want you to realize that there are activities for each book that can be found on the book page. There's word searches, there's crossword puzzles, there's a maze, there's decoding, there's the connections to Pennsylvania, there's all those things on there. And the little kids you see marching across there, I take one illustration from each book and have her color it, and that becomes the bookmark for that book. So and this is from the sword, the one there is from the sword. So that is the Journals of Antag, a story of music, magic, a boy and his dragon. And so that's what I do.
Oh, that's fabulous, Wendy. How about, I don't usually like to pigeonhole kids for age group, but are these like fourth grade, fifth grade typically?
Usually third through fifth.
Okay.
But I have adults who read them.
Sure.
And I actually, and this floored me one day too. A woman came to one of the places I was selling them, and she looked through the first ones when the call was out, and she said, "I'm going to buy this for my mom." And the woman was like in her 50s at least. And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "My mom is 96. She can still read, but she can't follow complicated storylines, but she can read middle grade and she loves it. So I'm going to buy it for her." Well, she came back the next year and bought the next one and the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what the age group is, but for the most part,
Yeah.
it's third through fifth or sixth.
Right.
But I will tell you, my beta listeners are second half of the year, second graders.
Excellent.
And in fact, I'm with the second grade for this is the 13th year, but it all has to be on Zoom, but we're pen pals so that I work on their writing with them as pen pals.
Mm-hmm.
But they just called me this today and said, after vacation, we want you to start the call with them. We want you to read it to them.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's how that works.
Nice connections.
Yeah.
Angie put a message in the chat for you. I'll read it to you. "Thank you for sharing the possibility of your real magic. I believe and I have great respect for your willingness to share this. It helps us to remember that our personal findings of magic is valid. Congratulations for your hard work and stamina to make your books a reality. Thank you so much for your presentation for Vose. The rubbings are also amazing." I agree. That's a special gift to your readers. You're an inspiration.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And it turns out I am working on another book now, and it is nothing like this. Nothing like these at all. And it's harder to write. It's a much more emotional book, a little darker. But there is another book that's a spin-off from these three that's coming after that one.
Very good. Do you have dates for those, or are they still in the early stages?
Are you asking about illustrations? Is that what you said?
No, for publishing these other.
Publication. The next one, I am up in the air. I do not have an agent. I've never had an agent. I am very hands-on with making them because my books to me are not just the words. It's the way they look. It's the way they feel in your hands. That's all very important to me. On the other hand, I have not been able to get very far out of Maine with these books because they don't say Scholastic on the bindings. They don't say Penguin.
Uh-huh.
I can't get them reviewed. I can't get them into contests, which to me is not fair. If you read the book, it's the book that matters, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm torn right now about whether to try and get this next one with an agent and then give it out for publication, knowing, Wendy, push your ego away. You cannot say what this book is going to look like. You can't do any of that. So
Yeah.
I'm torn right now about that.
Yeah.
But the one that comes after that, the one that's a spin-off, I can't imagine not having the same illustrator for it,
Mhm.
so I don't know where it's going to go. I'll be honest with you. I just don't know.
Well, that's part of the magic.
It's part of the magic. Yes, I will wait for the magic to tell me what to do with the next book. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been spectacular, and I really appreciate you giving us a sampling of, like you had mentioned at the beginning, some primary, and then a picture book for some older kids, and now these. It's just really a nice variety for us, and
good.
we'll be sure that we post this on YouTube so that many more families can enjoy it, Wendy.
Well, thank you. And I just remind you, let me know what you need and I'll send it. Okay.
We will for sure.
Okay. Thank you so much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a great evening.
You too. All right. Hold on. I have to stop